Monday Smash. That's Ira. I'm Jeff. Hello, everybody. How the hell are you? Thanks to our friend, State Farm Agent Russ Voorhis. My man Russ, been doing things a long time, serving the states of Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. Been a long-time supporter, a true Nole through and through, but he has supported the stuff that we do here, the stuff on Warchant, and, of course, Florida State. He's one of the original sponsors, and we salute you, Russ, as we start the show. Offices in Jacksonville Beach and Orange Park, and he can meet you virtually or any other way that you want to meet. You see the numbers right there on the screen. We'll fire that commercial up later in the day. How are you, brother?
I'm great, Jeff. How you doing, man?
I'm doing really well. Doing really well. In fact, let's get it started. Let's get there we go. Let's go. It's been a long Monday, Ira.
I hear you.
I got housework. You know how that goes. House stuff is not fun, man. I got plumbing issues.
Oh man, that's not fun.
Yeah, so there's gonna be a couple cold ones drank tonight.
I thought you were saying like yard work or something like that. I did a little yard work yesterday, dude. I made the switch to. I think I told you I made the switch to the battery powered electric.
It's the way to go.
All tools like lawnmower and
it's the way to go, buddy.
Weed eater and all that stuff. Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's been fun. They're like toys now. Like they're like toys compared to the old gas.
Oh yeah, you're fired up all that nonsense.
So I'm having fun with that. So yeah, I was out there yesterday. It was nice because it didn't rain for the first time in I don't know, it felt like a month. So
yeah, feel the same way, buddy. Feel the same way. Yeah. No, I've made a joke of it on the show. I've got drain field issues, and all it does is rain every day, and so my drain field doesn't work, which means, hey, guess what? You got a backed up toilet system. Fun.
Those are good times.
Yeah.
We've all been there, buddy. Home ownership is the best.
No, it's never again.
When you guys downsize, are you guys going to do the RV? Is that what you guys are going to do? Or are you going to?
Yeah. So the way the plan looks right now is I get these kids out to college and life begins for them on their own. Then that's it. I'm buying a big ass Winnebago and a condo, and that we're just going to do whatever the hell we want. I'm not maintaining nothing. Something goes wrong, I'm calling somebody and be like, hey, hole, get over here and fix this. It's not working. Click.
There you go. We'll be back. We're going to Montana for a couple weeks. We'll be back. This better be fixed.
Yeah. Just you take your time, but as long as it's done by the 7th when I get back to town, we're good to go. Right. All right. So what interests you tonight, man? There's a kind of a weird lot going on in a way.
Yeah, there is a lot going on. Baseball, softball, obviously, and some football. As you said, we were working on our top 40 things, so we could talk about that. But I figured, man, we also can let the chat take us where they want to go. I mean, if people have questions they're curious about, we definitely can. James B, I'm not doing. James B, got to understand. I got like less than a half. I got a half acre.
Yeah.
And I mean, basically, I'm mowing, I'm weed eating, I'm just edging. Trimming some bushes back. I'm not doing anything crazy, James B. I think I got you if you need bigger machinery, but for what I'm doing, I think they're going to be fine.
Yeah, we're not doing the heavy lifting around these parts. This is it. Yeah, and by the way, I do have a riding lawnmower for my yard, my backyard and front yard, but I kind of inherited that from the great Matt Millar. And until that thing dies, I'll keep using it. But I have electric everything else. So the weed eater is the one, man. That battery, just pop that bitch.
Oh yeah,
go! It's the best,
dude. My edging skills have always been poor to subpar, not terrible, but not good.
Yeah.
And now, man, I'm a different man now with that weed eater.
I
used to have my old weed eater was junk, so it's sitting by I'm about to put it out by the curb.
You know what it is, Ira? It's the same way that. If given the right moment, we might start talking about the weather. We're old. You get good. True. You just get good at stuff after a while. You start taking pride in that edging and the weed whacking and all that stuff. And then you sit back and look at it as if it's your crowning achievement, and you go to bed happy that night. We're simple creatures. We're very simple creatures. And I guarantee if you're like me, the best is the morning after when you walk out and see it. You're like, yeah, look at that. Looking good. I draw attention to it. I let my kids, I want to make them comment on the work that I've done.
I try, man. I try. My kids don't care, but I try.
Maybe it's because you have daughters. Maybe they don't.
Sometimes they'll humor me.
Okay. So you were asked a question. Let's get to that question because Oh, wait. Well, we got a couple of them here. First of all, Michael says, Jeff, bring back the Man Cave show. That's on Gene. Gene did the Man Cave show with me. And I think Gene pseudo retired, everybody.
Well, but his man cave is not a man cave anymore. It used to be. You have the studio, like so. People may not have actually ever seen. I don't know the full scope of it.
Oh yeah, it was awesome.
But we had the studio where we used to do the Warchant report, like the formal sit down Warchant report. Mm-hmm. And then off to the side, he had his bar, he had his fridge with all the libations, and then he had the little putting surface green thing there.
Oh, it was awesome. I missed those days.
Yeah, it was a nice setup, but I don't think any of that's there anymore. I think he donated the set to one of the high schools, I think, for their multimedia departments. I don't even know if any of the fun stuff is up there anymore. I think they've turned it into more of a proper space.
And I think it's like a workout center because they're workout pools over there at the Williams family these days. So, and they both look great. They're out there getting after it. But so bottom line is my man's moved on from the Man Cave show, but we also did it live. If you remember, we did it 7th Hill Tap Room. We did it at a couple of bars. Yeah. We did it at Deep one time. So if we want to start taking that, show on the road again, I'm sure like we could do some sort of Seminole headlines on the road if we wanted to. Yeah. Just a thought, maybe start doing Seminole headlines once a month during football season, once every other week during football season at various bars. You got your buddy over in Thomasville. We're on to something here. Let's go.
Let's make it happen.
I think so. There's plenty of people out there that would love to have you, me, and Corey hanging out, doing a show, imbibing, talking smack, having a good time at various locations around town. I'd love it. We should do it.
If you get Corey drunk enough, he'll show everybody his abs. And that's what we're there for.
Lee writes, Ira, great article. Oh, it's gone. Okay, there it is. Great article on the new corners. Who do you both think will make immediate impacts this fall?
I think it was Newcomers, maybe.
Oh, Newcomers. I saw corners because I'm blind. Guys. You got to deal with that. My apologies. Newcomers. Okay, yeah, you go first then, buddy.
So they've got, I guess they're going to have about 10. They've got 10 more high school players are coming in this week. In a week, they'll be arriving. All the guys that didn't enroll early. So they had 13 high school players enrolled in January. 10 more are going to show up later this week or early next week or this weekend to start their summer workouts. And they've got 3 more transfers coming in. Yeah. And so, of that group, I mean, it's hard to imagine a lot of the high school kids who are coming in this summer are going to make a big impact. I mean, it's no offense to those guys, but it's just hard to come in July, May or June, not have any spring practice and come as a high school freshman. 1 or 2 I'd watch for maybe is Elijah Moore, the wide receiver, just because that's a position where you could play pretty early.
And he's a big receiver, very
he's 6'4" kid, for sure. And then one interesting thing about him, I don't know if we talked about it at the time, but Darnell Dockett was real integral, buddy. Integral with helping Florida State get him. He's a Maryland kid. Dockett's obviously up there, so he was helpful. And then I think maybe I kind of wonder if the Emory Williams, the defensive end from South Florida, maybe he's a guy who could maybe do something. I think he's tight end / defensive end. But a lot of it's just, to me, it's hard to predict. Some of those guys are defensive linemen. They have 2 defensive linemen coming in. I can't imagine those are going to have an impact.
Not right
away. Maybe an offensive lineman or 2. And so I would look at the skill position guys more than anything.
I think Micah Danzy was at my son's high school yesterday or the day before. And
that's one that could maybe.
Yeah. And Bryce was very excited, by the way, of getting to hang out and talk with him. And I don't know what he was doing there. My son plays at Leon, that, but for the people listening, and he was there kind of hanging out, talking with receivers and stuff. So
didn't Leon's coach, didn't he used to be at Florida?
Yeah, maybe that's what it was. Yeah.
But Danzy that's one that's interesting because again, I don't know, man. They've got, how many running backs do they have, Jeff? So I don't know. Is he going to play a lot? But dude, watching the clips of him, Ben, our producer put up he went and shot him in Jacksonville, put up some video clips of him running the 200, 400. He won state in the 200 and 400, finished second in the 100.
Oh, that's what it was, Ira. That's what it was. So this will make you laugh. This is exactly what it was. Bryce came home and said, Dad, didn't you run the 200 and the 400 in high school? Which I did. Mm-hmm. And I said, I did. And I puffed out my chest. And then I found out he was only asking because he wanted to humiliate me by telling me what Micah Dancy ran.
His times are a little different than yours.
Yeah, he said to me, "You ran the 200 and the 400." I said, "I did." And he goes, "Yeah, I bet you didn't run what they run today." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm sure everybody's bigger, stronger, faster." And I just kind of brushed it off. He's like, "No, did you see what Micah ran in the 200 and the 4?" I was like, "No, I didn't." And he told me, and I went, "Yeah, that would have been embarrassing. That would have been embarrassing for me because you shouldn't be able to beat somebody in the 200 by 4 seconds." But yeah, so he's motoring. You're right about that.
Yeah, and the question in the chat, Grill Master asked, do we think he finishes his college career as a running back or receiver? He's interesting, man. He could do a lot of different things. He's 6'1", 180. He looks long and lean right now. But they like him as a running back, and that's where they're going to start him. I mean, it probably depends on, where the quickest path to playing time is. I don't know what he looks like as a receiver, but he's definitely going to start off as a running back.
Terry asks, it appears the Big Ten has secretly rolled out the welcome mat for some time while the SEC has slow played us. If the SEC counters with a last-minute comparable offer, what do you think FSU will do? Well, Terry, we've kind of had – I'm glad you asked this question. It gives us a chance to kind of revisit this conversation. At various points, me and Ira and Corey on headlines have talked about it. We've all individually talked about it on our individual platforms and shows like Wake Up Warchant. I know Ira's written about it, and I've talked about it on the Jeff Cameron show. I look, I sound like a conspiracy theorist, and I loathe that, but I kind of think to some degree this is determined, and there are some finalities left, but I kind of feel like to some degree this is determined. If ESPN makes a decision that they are not going to let the Big Ten plant a flag in their backyard and grab North Carolina, Florida State, and Clemson right in the middle of their footprint, these are huge assets. If they decide they're not going to let them do that, then they're probably going to tell the ACC that arrangement that they have, their current contract, is going to be with the look-in IRA that we all know about. It's gonna appear very different. The monies and the teams and all of that, and they'll take those assets and keep them under their own umbrella and move them to the SEC. And I don't think Florida State would turn that down. I know a lot of our fan base gets in their feelings about this stuff, Ira, because they hate ESPN, and I'm with you for all the stuff that happened with the snub. But, man, big money in business, people put their feelings aside in order to put themselves in the best position to succeed. So either ESPN will do that or they won't. And if they don't, then Florida State ends up in the Big Ten with Fox, right?
Yeah, I think that's accurate. And, somebody asked me this question. I'm sure some people watching this are wondering the same thing. And somebody just asked me this question, I think today or yesterday. Why would the SEC be interested if they've never been interested before? And again, where the landscape has changed, when everything was about cable television boxes, when that was kind of the driving force of all this, getting into new states was a big deal because the more states you were in, the more you could charge. So ESPN could charge a certain amount of money for subscribers in a certain state. But if you had a college football team in that state, then they could charge more for the ACC network or the SEC network. And so that was the real big reason why you would have said 10 years ago that the SEC doesn't want Florida State, because they already have
Florida, yeah.
They already have the Gators. So it's not going to bring any additional money. What's different now is we don't know what this is all going to be eventually in terms of television. ESPN very soon is going to start doing over the top distribution where they don't even go with a cable company. You can just pay $50 a month or whatever it is to just get ESPN.
The model is coming, correct?
Yeah. So when that comes, like, now we're not just bound by the cable boxes and what states they're distributed in and what carrier networks. It's about who's got the best product to put on television. And that's where things have gotten different. And if you just take a step back and look, if you just we're Florida State media, Florida State fans, this is the school we know, this is the school we care about. Sometimes that you have a loftier perception of the school you follow or cover, and sometimes you have a lower one. And I think in this case, because it's been so long that we've understood that like the SEC doesn't want Florida State. I think some people have gotten a lower valuation of what Florida State really is. If Florida State was a free agent, to me, Florida State would be like LeBron or Kevin Durant,
Right.
or I mean,
Right.
right?
Sought after as an asset. Yes.
I mean, think about being in charge of the SEC or being in charge of ESPN or Fox and knowing that Florida State was on the open market and thinking, I don't know. I'm starting this new venture where I want to sell subscriptions directly to consumers. I don't know. Do I want Florida State?
Right.
I mean, obviously they're going to want Florida State. And again, those numbers, if you look at the numbers between Clemson and Florida State over the last decade, where Florida State's numbers are similar to Clemson, maybe Clemson's got some good. Clemson was at the top of their history of their program. Florida State was middling for most of that time. And the numbers are about the same. When Florida State is on it and Florida State's good.
They're one of the 3 biggest brands in the country when they're good.
So it's hard for me to understand how like the SEC would not, or the ESPN, we probably should not say the SEC. It's hard for me to understand why ESPN would be like, okay, yeah, you guys go to Fox. So that's a long way to say, I agree with you, Jeff. I think that right now the surest bet is probably the Big Ten because the Big Ten's more in expansion mode and because they don't have properties in Florida and all those reasons. But I think at the end of the day, I think it would be incredibly irresponsible and stupid, I think, for ESPN to let Florida State walk away.
I have kind of maintained for a while, and there are people I respect in the industry, people we both know, Ira, that disagree with me on this. And this is one of the things where it's a fun kind of debate because even the side that disagrees would say, well, it's, I'm not 100% certain. So, because none of us know for sure what ESPN is going to choose to do with the contract with the ACC. We don't know what assets they cherish. Stands to reason they would cherish Florida State, Clemson, and maybe North Carolina, and maybe even in Miami. I don't know. But I agree with you. I think it'd be foolish to allow the Big Ten to do that. Let Fox, now you got me doing it. It'd be stupid to let Fox walk in there and grab 3 huge assets in the South in the biggest footprint that that is college football, really, and then truly be coast to coast, almost look down upon your little piddly regional conference, and say we got it from Los Angeles to Tallahassee. I mean, we are true, and then everything in between.
Right.
If it's a race to procure the best assets in the sport, and that we're moving inevitably towards 48, what do we think? Somewhere in that neighborhood? I mean, I've done this exercise before. I think you have too, where we kind of broke down if it turns into a Big 2 and who's invested, who's all in and wanting to win and win big and make the most amount of money. Well, at the time, I remember we said, this was before the Big 10 added what they have. I remember us talking about, Oregon with Phil Knight and Nike money has to be on that list. Yeah. I would think Southern Cal and UCLA would be on that list. And we just started Washington. We started naming the powers of college football. And where it got fun was we started to say, okay, look, there's a lot of programs in the last 60 years of college football that have a ton of cachet but are no longer relevant. Where does Nebraska land in all this? Well, they're in the Big Ten. They'll make it, okay, because the Big Ten kept adding. But we started going through and just picking off teams that were in and out. And that's where it gets fun because you have some border teams. But for the most part, everybody agrees that Florida State, Clemson, at the very least, are 2 of the most sought-after assets that remain, who are open to being plucked, who are begging to be plucked. Right. Everybody else, once Texas and Oklahoma went out of the Big 12 was rendered somewhat useless. And I don't know, what do you think it ends up as? 48? Because we got asked a question here, and I think we should get to it. Brett writes, do y'all think we'll end up with 48 to 64 schools who break away from NCAA football, football and hoops only, and form their own governing body? I don't know about the basketball part about that, but the football part, yes, I think that's where we're going to go.
Yeah, I think the basketball stays. I mean, I think the basketball is because that's what funds the NCAA.
It's the only thing they make money on, right?
And then they use that to run all these other championships.
Correct.
And so I feel like basketball kind of needs to stay with the NCAA. But football, yeah, becomes its own thing. And then, yeah, I think 48 is probably the top end.
At the most, right? At the most,
Right.
right? But
Yeah.
yeah,
And 36 is probably, man, super selective because I think there's some teams in there that you'd probably want and that would want to be in there because there's two sides of this. There's the schools that, like you said, um, the schools that you would want in this league because of their clout and their steam. And then there's also going to be a question of like what schools can make it happen, like what
right.
schools want to play at that level because it's not just going to be, using the money you get from TV and everything else. Like there's probably going to be commitments you have to make from a donor level to compete in that higher
Good point.
stratosphere.
That's a
So
really good point.
in the how much you're willing to put into scholarships and all that, there's just going to be more of a standard that teams are held up to. It's not going to be like it is today, where you have a Vanderbilt in the Power Five that doesn't really want to be a Power Five football program, but they're in the
They like the
SEC,
benefits of being a power.
right? And so, those schools, you might have some of those fall off, and then you have other ones that fill in. But yeah, that's where I would think it would be. And look, man, I think we all want it to be as soon as possible. But a lot of these TV deals still have several years on them. I mean, so I don't think it's going to be, my guess is, they might go to something like that when these latest SEC and Big Ten contracts, maybe when they come back up for renewal, which is still going to be way before 2036 when the ACC's does. But, so it's not, I don't think this is imminent, but yeah, I could see that being the case.
It's funny because there were predictions of this kind of stuff. I don't know if you've seen Jimbo's latest interview. Did you see his interview?
I just saw the parts that were on Twitter. Yeah.
Yeah. He's good in those settings, especially when he's talking to two of his former players. And in that case, he was talking to a former LSU player and a former FSU player in EJ Manuel. I remember having these conversations with him a while ago. He's not being facetious. He did predict that we were moving in this direction, and that's why he was always angry with the ACC, because he wanted the ACC to implore schools like Duke and Wake and others, BC and Syracuse, to start spending money on football because this is where it's at. But you didn't have to be a head football coach to know that. I mean, I think we all kind of knew that. By the way, thank you, Connor. Yay, sausage, BOGO this week in the Jacksonville area.
That's right. That's big news. We're going to talk about it on headlines tomorrow. Registers at BOGO at Publix. People are making it happen at the. That's wild. Good stuff.
Ben, when you get really, really rich, don't forget about us. Don't forget about the fact that.
Have you seen their coverage map?
It's crazy.
Where is Registers not available now? They're taking over the world. It's crazy.
It's good just stuff. The serial killers in Alaska that can't get it. That is it. That is all. I will say this. I talked about this on the show today. I do, for as depressed as I get, Alfred said he wishes it could go back to 2005. You and I talked about it today on the JCS. As depressed as I am about the cannibalistic nature of college football and what's happened, I do look forward to a time to some degree, although it's very much like the NFL. When we get to a 42, 44, 48 team thing and we're expanded to 16 teams and you could be 9-3 and easily make the playoff because your schedule's insane. Every weekend it's 6 times a year, I've got Alabama followed by Ohio State, followed by Georgia, followed by Michigan, followed by Tennessee, followed by, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. It does get crazy when you think about what your town is going to be like every weekend when you're involved with the biggest assets in college football. And I hate to describe them that way because they're universities, but who are we kidding? And how neat would that be? Like, I'm going to Madison this weekend to cover Florida State versus Wisconsin. Okay. That's going to be fun, right?
That would be wild. Yeah. I don't know, man. Like, there are so many things with college football. You're torn between the nostalgia of what we grew up with versus what it is becoming and where it could go. And on the one hand, it's like, I get it. Even this 12-team playoff, some people are sitting there saying, well, I liked it where you had to win all your games or the games really mattered. And, we've had the conversation before of what's going to happen if Florida State is won the ACC, or they know they're going to win the ACC, but they have Florida in a game that really won't matter, because if they just win the ACC, they know they're going to the playoff. So like those things are they give you pause, I guess.
Yeah.
But also, I don't know, man. Like if you think about like when Florida State in the 90s, and you can speak to this better than I can. So in the 90s, when Florida State was just destroying, winning however 20, 30 straight ACC games in a row.
Yeah.
And I don't remember exactly what their non-conference was besides Miami, but in Florida.
They played Miami and Florida every year, but they would always sprinkle in a Notre Dame and somebody like that. Texas A&M one year. Obviously, Kansas doesn't really count, but they would usually sprinkle somebody in there.
Yeah, and so they're making up for their crappy conference by playing.
Correct.
But then, like, when the ACC got better, then when Jimbo got here, Jimbo's like, why are we scheduling good non-conference opponents? We need to be playing FCS schools.
And I agreed with him, and our fans would get mad, but I'd get on the air and tell everybody, we're trying to win national championships. Stop scheduling, these schools. I mean, I didn't want to play all those teams, but go ahead.
So I guess looking at it from a big picture standpoint, which is better? Like, was it better the old way where you had maybe, I don't know, 3
mega games?
You had 3 or 4 huge games, but you had to win them all to get to the championship game, or this where you're going to have like a lot of really difficult games, but you could be 9-3 and get in the playoff. Like, what do you think? If you, again, not factoring in nostalgia, but just like, what do you think is a better way to what's a better product for fans?
Well, it's funny. You phrased it correctly, Ira, because if you remove nostalgia, there's no argument. It's much better to play a great team every week. Mm-hmm. Like watching us beat Idaho by 80. What was the point? What was the point of that? Like, why? I get it. The importance levels were ratcheted up beyond reason when you played the 3 great teams that could beat you. Like, you knew all signs point to these 3 games. Right. You got to win 2 of these 3, if not all, to have any chance to win a national title. And so walking into the stadium in 1991, 92, 93, as I did when I was a student, you'll probably never recapture that. You'll never recapture what that was. I remember when we were starving for a national championship. Bobby hadn't won one yet. I'd been going to games with my dad. This is like Corey. I'd been going to games with my dad since 1980.
Except your dad's still alive.
My dad is still alive.
That's the difference in these conversations, Jeff. Our dads are not.
For once, I went there and I did not. But I was sitting in those stands. I was at the erector set. I saw the Spirit Spear and the balloons and everything else. And I remember those days. And I remember it getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And then like coming to a crescendo and knowing we have to beat Nebraska. Like, this has to happen. Bobby's got to get his title. This is ridiculous. And then every year subsequently was, the same thing, like national championship or bust. There were 2-3 games that you circled, and that was it. But I also remember scoring 70 points against NC State. I also remember beating Duke, like, without trying by 60. And
knocking out 5 of their quarterbacks in the same game.
I remember looking at guys thinking, that dude's not much bigger than me, and he's playing against Florida State. This is a problem. Like, and if we're being honest, every week when we watch college football, other than what we have to do in our job requirements, Ira, with Florida State, we're circling the 5 games we got to see. Mm-hmm. What do we think about what we do? Think about how, like, oh, shoot, this is cool. No, Florida State's playing at noon. The 3:30 game is in play. By the time I get home, I'll get the second half of that game. The 7 o'clock tonight between Ohio State and Penn State, I'm going to be able to watch that live. I'm going to have a beverage on my porch and chill. We love the big matchups. We're going to get big matchups every week. It's going to be amazing.
But do you lose a little of the same? You're not going to have that same feeling, though.
Yeah,
right. You described it was do or die.
Yeah.
When you're playing, Florida. I mean, how many times did Florida wreck FSU season or vice versa?
Correct.
And it's like, because you knew if you lose this game, you are screwed.
Oh, yeah. I was in the stands in Gainesville in 97.
Mm.
And I'll never forget. I was there with my buddy Kobe. And, I'm a grown ass man and I nearly cried. I was so angry watching that game for a lot of reasons. And, golly, I'm still pissed about it. I just had a moment.
I don't know that those emotions are going to be there to the same degree if you go to a model where, you can have 3 losses and get in. So it's a trade-off, man, but the quality of play will be better. Like you said, you won't have, and, when going back to the original question of like SEC or Big Ten, I still think, man, it's so much better. It would be so much better for the local economy and for filling stadiums if Florida State's in the SEC. I'm sure those teams would come down, their fans would come down the first couple of times. I just don't know over a long period of time whether you're going to get those fans unless they're having a great season.
Yeah, no, it's I do think there are always unintended consequences to all this stuff, and I'm getting old and I see the unintended consequences to almost anything, right? Like when we get these advancements in technology, they're novel. And sometimes they're very interesting, and sometimes they actually make your life better, and other times they make certain things go away that you're going to miss forever. And you can't know that until it happens. And then it happens, and you reflect 5 and 6 and 10 years later, and you go, I'm not so sure that was a good thing. Right. This is a different conversation. We can end up having a very lengthy, in-depth conversation about the way we learn. And, I'm not so sure being able to look up everything in an instant is always the best way for us to remember anything. In fact, most of us don't remember anything anymore because you don't have to. You can look it up in a millisecond.
Dude, my kids were talking about this the other day. Like Alexa goes to FSU. She's a junior. She's going into her senior year at FSU. She's lived in Tallahassee her entire life. She's never lived anywhere other than Tallahassee, Florida. She's going into her senior year of college. She has a bunch of friends at FSU from all over the country. Kids that have moved to Tallahassee to go to FSU, and they'll go like to eat or to a park or whatever. And Alexa always has to pull out the GPS, and they're like, "Didn't you say you're from here?"
Yeah,
and she, like literally,
no idea.
If it's not on the GPS, she's not finding it.
Which is one of the things that I would say is better about today. I got to be honest with you, because I remember being lost in the middle of effing nowhere with a map, like going, where the hell?
I'm trying to remember how I found places. Like, remember back when we were kids, like you would have a friend. Well, I mean, you could get directions from a friend on the phone or something, but like, I remember going to a new town or like going to visit somebody. It's like, how did we find them? I don't think we had maps all the time.
No, you kind of went on a hunch.
I mean, people watching this right now, they're envisioning us like in the westward expansion, like we're charting the course, but it like you just had to find stuff. Well, it was completely different.
I drove from Johnson City, Tennessee after my surgery, and I was no longer playing. And I was devastated. I was a lost soul, guys. I'll just tell you that right now. And I got in a friend's borrowed Mustang. Never forget this. This guy, Daniel, let me borrow his Mustang, which was a POS. And it was beat up. And so I'm 1 hour into a trip from Johnson City to Orlando to visit my buddy Chris. And I'll never forget the stereo breaks. And I got to drive from Johnson City to Orlando with no stereo. And I'm singing at the top of my lungs at 3 a.m. in the middle of nowhere in the pitch dark.
Trying to stay awake?
Songs by memory so that I don't fall asleep. Like, our kids will never know that. It was nuts. I was just sitting here driving along. That's great. It starts with, and I'm just over and over, trying to see if I could remember every word. It was ridiculous. And I'm glad our kids aren't going to have to do that. They'll never be somewhere by a swamp in South Carolina going, we could die. I don't know where I am. This is not good.
And somebody in the chat, or Charlie says in the chat, MapQuest. And you're right, Charlie. There was a period of time once we got the internet, from somewhere in the mid 90s till mid 2000s where MapQuest was your option. But dude, MapQuest, my favorite MapQuest story, Kim and I had to go, we were going to Mississippi to visit some of her family. We're driving from Georgia to Mississippi, and I printed out the MapQuest directions. And we're in a tiny little rental car. And I get to a place somewhere in Mississippi where it says turn right on Rock Quarry.
You never want to hear the phrase somewhere in Mississippi.
Somewhere in Mississippi, Jeff, and it says turn right on Rock Quarry Road. It never dawned on me that I was going to be driving through a rock quarry. Like literally, that's what MapQuest. I mean, I'm in this little Matchbox car, and I'm looking. It's like the Flintstones are going to come out. We've got boulders, cranes. It's a rock quarry, and I'm just cruising through it because that's what MapQuest told me to do. Because that's what so MapQuest wasn't the greatest thing of all time. Is all I'm saying.
Well, see, so Ira and I can easily go down memory lane here. This is what we've done. But we should probably circle back to the idea of what's better. And I will say you're right. For the local economy, man, I'm telling you, I think the SEC is better. I mean, I think you agree with that, right? I mean, I think
it wouldn't be terrible in the Big Ten. It would be better in the ACC, but I think SEC would be better for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Tennessee 1 week, Auburn 1 week. You're on the road, easy drive up to Athens, easy drive over to LSU and Baton Rouge. Good times. I mean, this is what I liked about what Alfred said today was that we can lament a lot of the things that have gone away or that are going away, but it doesn't do anybody any good. You've got to attack now. I'm glad they got a very aggressive athletic director who gets it. I don't mean to besmirch all the athletic directors post Dave Hart, but I was a big Dave Hart guy. Not everybody is. But I was, and I thought he was forward-thinking and understood the money situation. And I because of circumstance in some cases, Florida State really hasn't had the ability to employ somebody like that since.
Well, I also think, and I made this point, I actually went over and spoke to the Extra Point Club the other day, and great group of ladies. And somebody asked me a question about kind of this topic, and this isn't like I'm not the first person to say this, but I think it bears repeating as often as possible. For the first time since I've been covering Florida State, you truly have a unified vision between the board of trustees, the president, the athletic director, and the boosters. Like all four of those groups are all of the same mindset. They're all pulling in the same direction. And look at what's happening right now in North Carolina. Like there's dissension there. They're not on the same page. That's why they haven't decided what they're going to do. Florida State, through the years, it was either, I agree, I like Dave Hart also, but TK Weatherall had no use for Dave Hart.
Well, they hated each other. So
yeah. And then you go through the issues through the years with, Jimbo in different factions. And, so you just never had, when Wilcox and the boosters didn't see eye to eye on a lot of these projects, there's a reason this football facility has taken 10 years to happen. I mean, they just could never get on the same page. Right now, you have everybody on the same page, everybody going in the same direction. So for that, I'm just excited because they'll actually get something done. I don't necessarily agree with everything they do. I don't necessarily know that they're going to nail this whole thing, but because this is a complicated, they've got a lot of stuff going on between the facilities and conference stuff and everything else, the lawsuits, but it is cool to see them all on the same page. And I think it's refreshing because for a long time it wasn't that way.
You make a good point, Ira. I think it's fascinating to watch this play out because there's a lot of jeopardy in all of this. There's a lot of unknowns. And I tell you this, I admire the gusto. It's a little bit like an entrepreneur who's just got unwavering belief and they overextend themselves. They've got, somebody's going to call those markers in at some point, right? but they've got loans out the wazoo, but their belief is that if you build it, they will come. And the idea is, I know I got to pay all this back. I know I got to do all these things. But if you could just understand what this vision is, and when I get it, we're going to be rich beyond our wildest dreams and easily pay back those loans. And we've seen movies like this, people who take a chance on themselves. I could reference an old movie like Tucker or whatever, but this is what happens where you say, no, this is going to work. Now I may have to, by hook or by crook, do all these things to get there, but once it's done, we're going to have everything we need, and then it's a money train. I kind of agree with that because of the asset, because of the way you have to view Florida State athletics, the way I think you have to view Florida State football's future. They got the right guy, and the time is now. I think we both wholeheartedly agree. There is no perfect coach, but Mike is the right guy.
Right. Yeah, without question. And I think what to echo your point, I don't know that they know or have known since the beginning of all this. When I say they, meaning the powers that be of Florida State, have known exactly how it's all going to play out. That it's all going to work out fine. That they're definitely going to have the landing spot they want. That they're definitely not going to have to pay hundreds of millions of dollars to get out of the ACC. Like, I think there are a lot of unknowns in all of this. The one thing I think they knew, the one thing that was unknown, was if they just sat and stewed in the ACC for eternity, they knew how that was going to play out. Like, that was Mike Norvell was going to end up leaving. The program was not going to succeed. They were going to flounder, and they'd be stuck in this also ran conference. So, to your point, it's almost like it's a little bit more of a educated guess than just an entrepreneur, because it would be like somebody working in the newspaper business, Jeff, in like or terrestrial radio full time, and just saying like, no, I'm good. I'm just going to stay here. I'm going to ride this out.
Yeah.
It's like, man, no, we may want to expand our horizons a little bit and see what else is out there in the digital world, because this doesn't seem to be going in the right place. So on a much bigger scale, I mean, I think Florida State kind of has been in that boat where they saw this coming. And I thought one of the great comments from Michael Alford last week was, when he was asked about North Carolina, he was asked about Clemson filing suit after they did, and then North Carolina now doing their saber rattling. And he said, this is not a new conversation. We've been having this conversation now for a long time. Now it's just more people saying the same things we've been saying, which, again, you got to give Florida State credit for taking all those arrows that they took in the beginning, because they were the only ones out there being the ones active in this effort. But, you just have to give them also a lot of credit for seeing it and not just kind of waiting and reacting, but being proactive.
I really wish, for the purposes of our readers and listeners and viewers, and for my own curiosity, and it will never happen, but I would love, and there have been a few moments like this behind the scenes. I'll reveal that, in Orlando, it happened a little bit before the LSU game, but I'll tell you, man, if there was ever a chance for you and me and Tom and Corey and Aslan and whoever else, and the high end, really big donors and Michael Alford and a few other people, to sit in a room and pour some very expensive scotch and smoke some cigars and have long conversations about this process. And because I will maintain, and you have great sources, Ira, I know that some of our sources are the same. Over the years, we've been able to join forces in some ways, but including working together now. But I would maintain that most of the people that recognized Florida State was in an untenable position, and I'm not trying to take credit away from Michael Alford, would have done the same thing, right? Like the writing was on the wall. Where were we going? You have no, even if this fails, it's the right play. It's like a hand in poker. Like, you're making the right decision based on the odds. You don't always win. It doesn't always work out, but it's the right play. And I just wanted somebody in that position of authority to be on the same page with the president, as you've pointed out, and to have the autonomy to do it and just say what we already know to be true. Guys, we're dead men walking if we don't get out of here. And you and I have known that, and a lot of other people have known that for a very long time. Like, the writing was on the wall to me. I'm not saying I could see everything that was happening, but we could all see that Sankey wasn't going to stop, and nobody was going to stop him. So, like, Hitler takes Poland, and then you just go, well, maybe he'll stop.
Right.
I don't think so, man.
Yeah, and I think again, go back to, 10, 12 years ago, when Andy Haggard and some of the other trustees and power brokers were kind of bringing these issues up when the gap was $7 million a year or $8 million a year, the dispute about the third tier rights and all that was happening at that time. I think the leadership at Florida State, and I think a lot of people, and I was of this opinion at the time, was that sucks. It's not ideal, but it's not worth going to the Big 12. And we knew at the time the SEC and the Big 10 had no interest. And that was that old financial model where, again, the SEC had no interest because they didn't care about getting television sets in Florida. They already had them in South Carolina. And the Big 10 was not interested in expanding across the whole country. But, man, the day they went and got USC and UCLA and the day the SEC went in Texas and Oklahoma, like you could have thought this was coming. Jimbo may have thought this was coming, as he's saying this week. You may have thought this was coming. John Thrasher may have like anybody that may have thought it was coming. But like once those two things happened, yeah, man, like you had Florida State would have been negligent to just sit there because we see what's going to happen within the next handful of years. Florida's going to be getting $30 to $40 million a year, maybe up to $50 million a year more than Florida State. You not only can you not win in football, how do you compete in any of these sports?
You don't.
Yeah.
And this is why I get mad. And you saw I got mad the other day when we were doing this show, not at you, but just in general, I think it's a disingenuous argument that many of these writers have put forth. And I don't give them the benefit of the doubt. I don't. I have to question the motivation. I don't. On the one hand, I'm complimenting people who I think have written wonderful pieces over the years and have proven themselves to be very talented at what they do. And on the other hand, because I credit them with having the intelligence to do those pieces, I now question their motivation for writing the kinds of nonsense that we've seen. And it's not one guy. I mean, I know I attack one guy often, but it's been several, as you correctly pointed out when we were talking about this. Like, whose water are you carrying? Why are you doing that? Why are you saying those things? I don't care if you went to UF or you went to wherever. I mean, Louisville. Or why would you do it? Like, you know exactly what we're talking about. You know why Florida State is doing what they're doing. To pretend otherwise is absolutely an embarrassment, and it's disrespectful to people's intelligence.
Well, there was a thing on Twitter today where there was it was a graph showing the growth of revenue in the ACC since 2005 or whatever it is. And it's been exponential growth. There's been plenty of growth in the ACC. But if that pales to the growth in the Big Ten and the SEC, then it's irrelevant. Like I could tell you that, yeah, Jeff, when I was working in Thomasville, I made X amount of dollars and now I make Y amount of dollars. Well, that's great. Good for me. I've improved my status in the last 25 years. But compared to whoever, I mean, it's a fraction, I mean, it's, somebody that's some tech wizard or something, so you have to have the context and, they're clearly, some people are just, you just want to, I don't know what the motivations are sometimes. I don't know if it's just because they said it once. Like, again, 10 years ago, I was of the opinion that Florida State, if your choices are the Big 12 or stay, just stay. And make the best of it and do what you could do. I was never a proponent of going to the Big 12. But when the circumstances changed and you look like there's a sliver of a hope to get the hell out of here and get in the Big 10 or the SEC, to me, it's a totally different question. I don't think those options were available 10 years ago.
I agree with you on that. By the way, before we answer the last few questions for the last 10 to 15 minutes tonight, let's have our friend Russ Voorhees and his commercial for State Farm run right now, Ben, and then we'll talk up our buddy.
Contact Russ Voorhees for an auto quote today.
I can tell you Russ Voorhees is really excited about the direction Florida State's going. I sat in the box with him for the ACC championship game. We had a long discussion about Florida State football and where it's headed and where we think it has a possibility to go. Serving the states of Florida, Georgia, and Alabama, support a true Seminole who has given back to Florida State in the form of an endowed scholarship as a Golden Chief booster, by the way. One of Warchant's original sponsors, as I said earlier tonight. Offices in Jacksonville Beach and Orange Park, and the ability to meet virtually at your convenience. RussVorhis.com. You see it there on the screen. You see, as a State Farm agent, I can vouch. I'm not a State Farm agent, but he is. But I can vouch for him as one. And he has been very, very loyal to us and does a great job. So
yeah, and if you give them a call, or if you call the office, or send in a request for information on their website at russvorhis.com, just mention that you listen to the Smash. You're like Florida State. You're a Florida State guy, a Florida State gal. He, again, that makes him feel good that he's doing business for those people. And so, again, there's no obligations. It's not going to be high pressure. But if you want information from a good guy, a good Nole, reach out to Russ.
If I were Corey, I'd tell you that if you reached out and used our name, it would be free.
Yes, that's right. That's how it works.
Lee asked a question earlier today, something I posited. Ira, I want your response on this, just because I get mad about this all the time. Now, you take a more pragmatic approach than I do. Jeff, if time allows, would you expand upon your comments today on the JCS for FSU to stop helping the NCAA regarding investigations, inquiries, self-reporting, and the like? It's like paying more taxes than you owe. Well, here's the funny part about this, Lee, and I'll let Ira comment on this because he'll be more level-headed. Ira and I are very similar, very close. Ira and I are close. I'd say over the years we've gotten close. Tampa St. Pete was a little rugged. Miami was a little rugged. We've had dalliances on the darker side. We know what it is to be on the margins, to be on the line, morally, ethically. And I'm just not going to always adhere to certain things, especially when I know everybody I'm competing against isn't adhering to certain things. And I'm sure as hell not going to turn the lights on and expose frailties or problems within the organization if it's going to cost me long term, because I don't respect the organization that's doing the investigating. And that's my main thing, is that I don't respect the NCAA. And so and their inconsistencies. So a lot of what Florida State's done over the last number of years is tell on itself and be in a hurry to try to tell every aspect of what they did. And I'm always like, stop doing that. Because the NCAA doesn't allow you to curry favor and doesn't give you the benefit of the doubt and say, okay, well, thanks for letting us know. Here's a slap on the wrist. Seems to me, Ira, they come back with a hammer.
Two separate issues, I think. Okay. So the big NCAA investigation deal, since we've been covering Florida State, the big one was the music theory class that the cost boundness wins and all that whole deal.
Noles tutor, sure.
And we can do a full show on the background of that case, how that came to be, how Florida State got entangled in that. But back then, and certainly before that time, there was a feeling with the NCAA. There was evidence that if you worked with the NCAA on your allegations and you fessed up to whatever happened and you work with them and you self-impose things ahead of time, you could get ahead of it and it would help you out. In the last, 10, 15, 20 years, it seems like it's gone away from that. Like the NCAA stopped really helping people when they did that. So there was a period of time where that was the prudent thing to do. And if you saw, FSU in the thing they sent last week where they're asking to have the restrictions reduced, they're using that law firm over there near the NCAA. And that's what's always been the case is you would get, if you wanted to curry favor with the NCAA, you'd hire, I forgot, is it Burst? Was that the guy's name? David Burst? Yeah. You'd hire the guy that used to work for the NCAA, his law firm, and they would help you kind of, get the best deal as possible. Mm-hmm. Well, then at some point that stopped. So I think you're right. I agree with you that Florida State and most people have come to the point where they're not going to work with the NCAA anymore. This was a unique situation though, man, because this was the first NIL type case where the NCAA was really going to come in and had every intention. The big thing that they wanted in this case was the fact that they were going to charge a booster. Exactly. Not just a coach or, a coach or a recruit or, a booster, but they were going after a booster for an NIL transaction. And the feeling in the landscape was the NCAA is looking to throw the book at somebody to set a precedent that we're not giving up, that we're going to come down on people for this. So there was a little bit of fear that they might really go after FSU, and FSU was in a bad situation here because they kind of were caught dead to rights.
Well, they were guilty, sure.
So there was not really like a lot of wiggle room. There wasn't a lot of. So I think Florida State was in the standpoint where the NCAA is going to come down on somebody. We need to mitigate this if we can. So I think that's what happened. Going forward, yeah, I mean, I guess I understand exactly what you're saying, but I think
never again, man, never again.
That was the thought at the time. And then on the other flip side of it, though, I do understand why they want to get out of it. But one thing I want to clarify, because a lot of people are wondering why they're not asking to get Alex Atkins's suspension removed. Because what they asked for last week was to get relief on the scholarship reductions, the dates that they can go out and recruit, and also the fine, which is, I think when I looked, it was going to be like a few $100,000.
Yeah.
They want all that to go away, but they're accepting Alex Atkins' suspension. The reason is because even if you took the NIL out of it,
it's still in violation.
It was still in violation. Like you can't have a college assistant coach transporting a recruit to meet, all that stuff. So that's why they're not going after that. But to your big picture thing, I do think the circumstances were a little unique this time because they knew the NCAA was going to try to hammer somebody, and they just happened to be the first one, and they were caught dead to rights.
And I'm not expediting that process, and I'm waiting on the NCAA to have their knees clipped, as they constantly do these days. And I get it, man. The reason, by the way, so you're right about the 100% right about everything you just said. But the Alex Atkins thing, like, I don't know how to phrase this properly, but coaches aren't as important on game day as people think they are. They're more important the day-to-day operations that you're dealing with them. Like a coach teaching a player in film room is much more vital than anything that's going to happen on a Saturday. So it could be Mike Norvell. I mean, go back to last year. I know Michigan was a much better team than the people that they were facing at the time that Harbaugh was suspended, but Harbaugh didn't have to be there on game day for them to operate. It was fine. I mean, their offense is their offense. Their defense is their defense. They run it every day in practice. He's allowed to be at practice. They go over the film together. They have the game plan together. They do all the things they're going to do on Saturday together. The only difference is on the actual day of the game, he wasn't allowed to participate. That's not a big deal. It's not. I mean, now it's not ideal.
Well,
it's not there every week.
And you've got, I don't think it's going to marginal. I think it would be marginal.
At all, Ira.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you're going to have a very experienced offensive line. Plus, you have people on the staff. Chris Thompson's been a Power 5 or high level offensive line coach. You have some analysts on the Gabe Fertitta and these other people on the staff that have a lot of experience as well. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be a huge problem for Florida State in those 3 games. I do think, but if you can get some reduction on those other things, I certainly think they should try.
Especially the scholarships. Last 3 questions before we leave, and I didn't get to them. They were started earlier by Ben. Okay, so this is interesting just because I know my answer. I want to hear yours. Jeff and Ira, was the postponed Game 3 with Georgia Tech finish due to ACC tourney seeding or Georgia Tech wanting/needing the quad 1 win?
Why did they finish the game?
Why they finished the game? First of all, they had an extra day because it wasn't a Sunday; it was a Saturday. Yeah. So there's that. But go ahead.
Yeah, I actually hadn't done any digging around in this. I just assume if you could get it in, you get it in.
Exactly. You want to get a conference game in no matter what. We would want that same ability afforded to us if we were on the road and we had a chance to win a baseball game. But yes, seeding mattered and quad mattered. They had the extra day. It wasn't a Sunday. There was no travel problems whatsoever. Right. So why not play it?
Yeah, there was no reason.
What's that?
Yeah, and I think you could see how pissed off Link was in the video afterwards. Where, he just can't believe they blew that game. I mean, they had it won, and it would have been nice. It would have been nice. It would have been nice to have that sweep and just kind of carry that momentum forward.
This is where they're at, though. I mean, they're just not good enough in a lot of ways. I mean, it's been a remarkable turnaround, but we'll talk about this tomorrow in headlines. Tom writes, Jeff and Ira, what is the discussion regarding FSU football this time next year? Oh, good question, actually. Ira, go ahead.
Yeah, man, I think it's going to be a lot of excitement about young quarterbacks. I'm putting my chips right now on Luke Kromenhoek. I love you, Brock Glenn, but I think Luke is going to be the guy in 2025.
Wow.
I think there's going to be a lot of excitement about him. I think there's going to be a lot of excitement about a lot of these young guys from these last two classes.
Mhm.
We were over there talking to Mike Norvell this past week. He's fired up about this freshman class,
Yeah.
the early enrollees, and he's really excited about this freshman class they just brought in. And I love the freshman class last year. But then it's going to be about, okay, who are the 10 to 15 pieces that they went and got from the transfer portal to kind of fill out the rest of the roster. I think obviously the biggest questions I think are going to be defensive line. I mean, if Florida State has a big year, man, you're going to be rebuilding the hell out of that defensive line, right?
Yeah, you are, but
next year.
man, they are locked in on some classes right now. I mean, some kids right now. This is exciting. I think we're really, really on the verge of something great here in Tallahassee, as if going 13-0 didn't just happen. Riley writes, I'm starting to be of the opinion that we really need UF to beat Miami on August 31st for recruiting purposes. Anybody else see Miami as getting momentum at a disquieting pace, given the crap show on the field? I agree. Miami has decided, just so you guys know, and I know you do too, Ira. I know specifics about Miami and what they're spending. Miami has decided that Mario cannot fail, and they are going to try to make him not fail despite his game day stupidity. And so this is a classic case of, if we just have better players than everybody, we can't possibly do worse than 10-2. And if we go 10-2 and compete for an ACC title, we'll gain momentum. And if we gain momentum, we're in the most fertile grounds in all of America to house great football players. So they have decided to ante up. They are overspending. They're overpaying players. They are overpaying the market for said players in the hopes that this all in gets them to a number that Miami is viewed to have momentum, and they can keep those South Florida recruits in South Florida. Because we know when Miami's good, those players in Miami stay home. And that is the most fertile ground in all of college football. So, yeah, I agree with that. It would be nice to see Florida beat Miami.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't know if I believe the premise anymore that South Florida kids are going to stay in Miami, just because it just doesn't really. I mean, and now, and again, Alabama's not going to be Alabama without Nick Saban.
Right.
We'll see if Clemson falls off from what they were, but you had, those schools and several others, Ohio State, were coming down and getting some of the best players out of South Florida. But I do think, yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you're saying about Miami. Their situation is it's pretty transparent.
Yeah,
you paid Mario Cristobal $80 million. You signed a deal for over $80 million. It was like
it's insane. Yeah.
I mean, 8 years, $10 million a year.
Big.
And so they have to succeed. So you could make a case that maybe they divert some of that money to help to somebody like an assistant coach who can help him on game day, to tell him to kneel on the ball, like just like an advisor to stand next to him. Mario, what are you doing? We've talked about it before. Have one person on the headset when Mario makes a dumb decision who has the power to say, no, Mario, no, we're not doing that. We're not doing that right here. So maybe they can invest the money there. But yeah, no, they're investing it in their roster. And they're going to out-talent most of the teams they play this year. And they have a pretty easy schedule. So yeah, I think they're going to have a good year. But I also don't know that it's sustainable, because at some point you have to develop players. You have to, and the other thing I want to see is if we're right, if we believe that one of the strengths that Mike Norvell has is not just getting great players, but getting them all to come together and play together and maximize their all strengths and minimize their weaknesses and all the stuff good teams do. Mario hasn't proven he could do that. Yeah, so they have acquired talent, but we don't know if it's going to work at the same level. And if it doesn't work at the same level, then they're not going to get to where they need to go. But yeah, to the initial question, yeah, I think that UF game is going to be fascinating. If Miami, with what all they put into this roster, goes into that game and loses in Gainesville to a coach that everybody thinks is going to get fired in 2 or 3 months, it might be tough for them to overcome.
It'd be beautiful. Very quickly, James B., I accidentally banned you. You are not banned.
Oh, no.
I was trying to ban Galaxy King. And so I did ban Galaxy King, but I clicked the wrong button. So James B, if there's any chance you're listening, you were not banned. We love you, James B. It just looks like you were banned. And for the next 2 seconds, you are banned until we say goodbye.
Hopefully that doesn't carry over.
I don't think it carries over. Ben, if you could unban James B before we sign off, that'd be great. Because I took the initiative. Hey,
real quick, do you block people on Twitter?
No, I mute them.
So I never blocked anybody because I was like, you know what? I'm not giving you the satisfaction of blocking you, and I'm not going to do it. And I would just let it sit there, or occasionally I would mute people. Yeah. Now I'm team block, Jeff.
Are you?
I want them to know I'm blocking them. Yes.
You just block a bitch.
Because you know what's got me? It's the stupid stuff with the Orange Bowl. Because anytime you tweet anything about that team being 13-0 or getting screwed by the committee and all that, all of these SEC lunatics come out and troll you. So now I block them all. So I've changed my stance on that. I'm a blocking Jesse now on Twitter.
I like that you're blocking Jesse. I don't block anybody. I mute him. I've muted half the world. People are yelling at me nonstop, but they're yelling at the sky.
You muted Corey.
I've muted. Yeah, I'll mute anybody. I muted Tom for a month and a half. I just muted. I have people coming up to me that I've known since I was 10. Jeff, I've tweeted at you 15 times in the last. No, I muted your ass. You pissed me off one night.
I'll hear it.
Ira, it's been fun, man. This was great. I'll talk to you tomorrow on Seminole Headlines. Don't forget to do that, everybody. Our thanks to Russ Voorhis. Go check him out, russvoorhis.com. Ben, great job out of you as well. And until we meet again, and sorry, James B., that's my bad. I didn't mean to mute you. I banned you. I hope you're all right. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye, Ira.
See you, Jeff.
Later.